Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about music by Bieber and one of the most extraordinary of all of the early music releases that came out since the dawn of time. It was this one. Bieber Violin Sonatas. There were 8 of them. It's not part of a collection like the Rosary Sonatas or, Tom Aulis, Quan something, Servientes, Acapulco. I don't know. They have these long Latin names, Fidicio, Sacro, Profanum, Commencibus, something. They sound like Sarabji piano works. No, this was just a disc called Bieber Sonatas. Violin sonatas featuring a little group called Romanesca, which consisted of Andrew Manze, Nigel North, lute and theorbo, and John Toll, harpsichord and organ. And it was on Harmonia Mundi. And I remember when this came out. It was 1994. And in those days, Harmonia Mundi had marketing. They were really a major label in those days. They were a distributor in the U.S., of course, but also a record label. And Harmonia Mundi USA was a subsidiary of Harmonia Mundi France, the larger Harmonia Mundi France, and they were really an amazing company at that time. They had a real identity. They had discovered Anonymous 4, remember them? And every year they would do a road show to highlight their upcoming releases. And one of the releases was this one, the Bieber Violin Sonatas with Andrew Manze. Now, most people at that time really had no idea who Bieber was, unless you were a real Baroque music specialist. I mean, we knew that he wrote big choral works like the Mrs. Salisburgensis, which has since been more attributed to him. Back then, we weren't even sure he was the composer. He was active in Salzburg. He was a violin virtuoso. He was known for the Sonata Representativa and the Combattimento, the battle piece that he wrote that was sort of popped up on discs of eccentric, strange Baroque things from creaky German towns or German lands. He was a shadowy figure, let's put it that way. Andrew Manze was as good as unknown. This was his first major recording project. It came in a bigger box in those days, with this lovely picture of this dead bird splattered out over it, the roadkill photo, as Harmonia Mundi's Robina Young, who was running the show in those days, along with René Goiffon. But Robina used to call it the roadkill photo. Why they picked it, I have no idea, but there it was, and she plonked on the beginning of it, and we all went, "Ooh, baby! That's really something." And the reason it was really something was largely because of the violin playing of Andrew Manze, who has since been making a name for himself as a conductor of normal music. One of the problems with the Baroque ghetto is that the people who are in it at some point in their careers generally seek to break out of it because it's limiting. I understand that. They want to do more. They have wider interests than just, the scratch and saw school of Baroque violin virtuosity. But Bieber was a wonderful, wonderful composer. The problem with his music is that in those days, in 1681, which is when these things were composed or published, instrumental music was in its infancy. The idea of extended works just for instruments without voices was new. I mean, reasonably new in art music. Most instrumental pieces were just dance pieces or little songlet things or transcriptions of songs and things like that. If you wanted to do instrumental music, it was either contrapuntal, like fugues or organ keyboard things or, other stuff like that. And so these sonatas were historically important in establishing virtuoso violin music for itself, just for itself, in multi-movement sonatas. But most of the movements, the sonatas are 11 minutes, 8 minutes, and most of them are in multiple sections. tiny, tiny little segments, not necessarily separate movements, but tempo areas, each with their own bit of virtuosity, some a little bit lyrical, some slow, some fast. And they cobbled them together that way. Sonata form didn't exist. Music in large forms did not exist unless, like I said, it was a contrapuntal thing, like a fugue. And so these were like totally new. Totally new for me, totally new for most of the critics and others who were assembled in whatever hotel Harmonia Mundi showed up at. And they served very nice snacks, which of course was a major attraction in those days. And I remember as the industry started to tank, the snacks became less interesting. Finally, all we got was like fruit on a toothpick. And we knew that the industry was in deep trouble when we got to the fruit on a toothpick. But this was a great record. Just a great record. And it was such a joy to hear and to get to know Andrew Manze, who was one of the first Baroque violinists who was a great violinist. I mean, you wanted to hear him play because his playing had such character and such fullness of tone, relatively speaking, compared to his colleagues in the Baroque universe. I mean, it was another level of Baroque violin performance. And as far as I'm concerned, this disc absolutely remains one of the greatest recordings ever. You also get, by the way, the Sonata Representativa, which is one of these solo violin things where the violin imitates things like birds and dogs and, other goodies. It's a totally programmatic work. You have the Passacaglia for solo lute, played by Nigel North. You have the Passacaglia for solo violin, which is a 10-minute long, extravaganza. I mean, it's like the Bach Chaconne from his D minor partita for solo violin. It's a major work for solo violin and gloriously played here. And the Sonata La Pastorella, the Pastorella, the pastoral lady, the shepherdess, one of those things. Anyway, it's a terrific double disc. And certainly worth owning now if you can still find it. It should never be out of print, ever. Never. And I love it. I love it still. And it is unquestionably one of the greatest recordings ever of its kind. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.